Hi, everyone, and welcome to part 6 of our Introduction to Economics review series. This review is going to really focus on demand, supply, and prices, and it's really going to kind of be a continuation of what we covered with our part 4 and part 5 review mini lectures. So if you have not yet watched those, or if you have not watched those recently, I suggest going back and revisiting those. Much like with the layout of our previous review mini lectures, I have put together a list of applicable terms, and I will be going through each of these in an attempt to kind of show you how these terms all relate or tie in with each other. So first up, we have a market equilibrium. This is a situation that occurs if quantity supplied is equal to quantity demanded at a particular price. So using the supply and demand model, the equilibrium point can be depicted as the point where the demand and supply curves cross each other. So it's important that you understand that free and efficient markets are generally going to tend to gravitate toward that equilibrium point. Equilibrium price, well, this is really easy enough to understand, especially because we still have that supply and demand model up on our screen. But equilibrium price is just going to be the price point associated with where quantity demand and quantity supplied are equal with each other. So in this case, we're able to just look at the supply and demand model, and we're able to identify which price corresponds with where both the supply and demand curves cross each other. It's important to also understand that market equilibrium price is also sometimes referred to as the market clearing price. So if you come across a description of a market situation or circumstance where they use the terminology market clearing price, try not to be confused by that. Just keep in mind that that is going to really just equal equilibrium price or mean the same thing. Surplus, this is going to occur when quantity supplied exceeds quantity demanded. And you might come across a question on a quiz or an exam that asks for the definition of surplus or shortage. It's important that you understand the difference between quantity demanded and demand, and quantity supplied and supply. So the term surplus is specifically concerned with quantity, and we can see that by looking at the supply and demand model that's currently on the screen. So we see surplus, and that is the shaded region above the equilibrium price point, or the equilibrium point in between the supply and demand model, or in between the supply and demand curves. So our equilibrium price is about 250. If we look at any price above that equilibrium price, we're going to experience a surplus. So we're going to go straight to the top here at our $5 price point, and we're going to look at our quantity demanded, which is approximately 10, and our quantity supplied, which is approximately 60. We know that the definition of a surplus is where our quantity supplied exceeds quantity demanded, and that is the case here. So when our price is 5, we have a quantity supplied of about 60, which is greater than our quantity demanded, which is approximately 10. So we are experiencing a surplus. Shortage occurs when the quantity demanded exceeds quantity supplied. So again, pay close attention to the keyword quantity. It's also worth noting that shortage is not the same thing as scarcity. Scarcity is a permanent situation, whereas markets are actually able to adjust in the long run for shortages. So shortages are temporary situations, assuming markets are able to adjust for that shortage gap. And if markets are being constrained by price controls, they might not be able to adjust for a shortage or for a surplus. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly. But I do want to kind of quickly demonstrate shortages to you using that supply and demand model similarly to how I did it for surplus. Once again, we have our equilibrium price point, which is about 250. So any price that is less than 250 we're going to start to experience a shortage. So we're going to go all the way down to this price point of 1. And we see that our quantity demanded is over 50 and our quantity supplied is 10. Now the definition of shortage, again, is a situation where quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. So in this case, at the $1 price point, our quantity demanded is more than 50, which is greater than our quantity supplied, which is approximately 10. Producers engage in competitive pricing when they enter a market at a lower price in an attempt to increase its customer base while also maintaining profits by selling additional units. You're likely going to think back to what we learned about the law of demand when I explain this, and that is the correct connection for you to be making. If you are familiar with the law of demand, or if you need a refresher on that, I'll include a link to my mini lecture on the law of demand in the description of this video. Rising prices act as incentives that draw new producers into markets, and existing firms will also be encouraged by those higher prices to increase their output. Governments sometimes intervene in the price system via price controls. Price ceilings and price floors are two different kinds of price controls. Price ceilings are legal maximums that producers may charge of a specific good or service. In order for a price ceiling to be effective, it must be set at a point below the equilibrium price. So if the price ceiling is set above the equilibrium price, markets will tend to operate at that equilibrium price point. Which kind of, to circle back around to what we learned about shortages and surpluses, markets are generally going to be unable to adjust for a shortage if there is a price ceiling, because price ceiling by its nature is there to prevent markets from achieving that equilibrium price point. Price floors, these are legal minimums that must be paid for a specific good or service. Now, in order for a price floor to be effective, you might already be able to jump to this conclusion, but they must be set at a point above the equilibrium price. So if the price floor is set below the equilibrium price, markets will operate at that equilibrium price point. Finally, we have black markets. The emergence of a black market or an illegal market is an unplanned consequence resulting from governments interfering in markets by either making a product or service illegal, by introducing price controls, or a rationing system. Now, the main takeaway here is that black markets are not generally sustainable when there is an efficient and legal alternative. So that's all I had for these particular terms and concepts. Thank you for watching. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to help explain any of the terms that I covered in either this video or any of the other mini lectures that I have posted. Thank you and have a good night.